So everyone using policy profiles needs to have a login. So everyone's attached to an author profile, which we'll see in a minute. So I can log in just by putting in my email address there. I'm hitting continue. And then verifying it. That sent an email to me, and I'm going to go and click on the link to get the next step. That sent me a link to my email. You don't have to create a password if you don't want to. I'll do that thing where it just sends you an email and you click on the link. So I'm going to skip creating a password. And then the key thing is that every login is associated with a profile, so an author profile. And in an ideal world, we'd use ORCID because that's what ORCID's from. But then, unfortunately, we don't live in an ideal world, and ORCID is not used as much as ideally it would be. So we give you a few different options. One is if you do have an ORCID and the record's up to date, you can paste it in there, and it'll go ahead and it'll pull in all your papers, and we'll see what that looks like in a minute. But otherwise, you could just type in your name. So I'm going to use John Rawls. I'm not John Rawls, but I don't have that many policy citations, so I'm a bad person to demo the tool for. John Rawls does. He is I'd not heard of him. He's a philosopher. He was a philosopher. He died quite a long time ago, but he does have a lot of policy mentions, despite being in philosophy, interestingly. So if I do John Rawls, the tool goes away and it looks for author profiles where the name is John Rawls, and it's using OpenAlex for that, which is a great database and also has some author disambiguation functionality in it. And so in this case, there's lots of different John Rawlses at different universities: Chicago, Duke, Kentucky, and this kind of thing. General Atomics, interestingly. I know this one. This is the one I'm looking for. The John Rawls that we're interested in is at University of Chicago. They've got 132 articles. So there's a thing here which is interesting, I think, from a metadata perspective, if not to users. So I'm going to pick this John Rawls who has 132 articles in OpenAlex and say, this is me. If that was lower than what I expected, or, I was split across multiple profiles or anything like that, there's another fallback mechanism, which is I can paste DOIs straight in. So if I'm an academic that does have a list of DOIs from my publications, that's the kind of the power user way into you could do that. Or if I had a librarian helping me, for example. But we expect most people just type in their name and then click on their profile and continue. So the next step is just to double check, because it's an automatically done, OpenAlex automatically calculates these author profiles. We want to just make sure that the articles in the profile do belong to you, and there's not some false positives in there. So you can go through it and, well, I'm going to select all, but you can unselect the ones if they're added there by mistake. The metadata thing I mentioned before, I think it said there was 132 articles in OpenAlex, and here there's only 66. And it's because the tool, for lots of reasons, only looks at items with a DOI. So it's a limitation of the tool at the moment. So John Rawls has been around for a long time. He'll have some books and monographs that don't have a DOI, for example. That'll be on his OpenAlex profile. But it's not that they're not valid, but in the context of policy citations, it needs to have a DOI for it to work properly with the system. So only these 66 items are going to be considered. So I can curate things a little bit here, and then when I'm done, I'll do continue. And that's it. So it's gone off to Overton, and it's pulled back data in various different ways. And it's now going to show me the dashboard. So this is John Rawls's dashboard for where he is cited in policy and when and where as well. So actually the tool is really more for I would say more useful qualitatively than quantitatively, in that we have these numbers here, but they're really kind of broad indicators. They're not metrics. So we don't want you to be saying like, I've got 49 citations and the person down the hall has 32, therefore I have more policy impact than them. because impact doesn't really work that way, right? So it's very subjective, gets very subjective very quickly, and also depends on what you're trying to use the data for. But at the same time, I want to just give you some high level stats. So that's what these are. We're tracking two things. So again, having said that, policy impact gets very subjective very quickly. The other thing is complex. There's lots of different ways to have the academics engage with policymakers. So one of them is, you produce research and it gets cited directly by a policymaker, by a government. And that's probably the simplest case, but it's also the least frequent, I would say. In that, policymakers, Congress, people in a congressman's office don't read academic journals as much as we might want them to. They just don't. So it does happen, and sometimes there'll be a technical agency within the government, like the FDA does read academic papers, for example. So you can get policy that way. But it's kind of the slightly less frequently. The second more common route in is you get cited by a knowledge broker, somebody in the policy space, a knowledge broker or some other intermediary. And a classic example of this would be someone like the Congressional Research Service in the US. And their job is to be, the interface between academia and policymakers. And Congress people don't read journal articles, but they might read policy briefs from the Congressional Research Service, or from RAND, or from Brookings, or from Heritage Foundation, or the World Health Organization, or World Bank, or any number of other kind of groups. So that happens a lot more frequently, and is one of the big differences between, I'd say, academic, like traditional scholarly citations and policy citations. Is those intermediaries are really important. I mean, we show you that in the app. We'll look at an example in a minute. And then the third way of engaging that we track is a kind of a more general thing. What we're looking for is name mentions inside documents from policy sources. And what this is meant to pick up, or what it does pick up, is things like if you were on an expert panel for an IGO, like World Bank, how should we treat heart disease in 2018? If you were called to give to a meeting there about that, if you were a witness or you gave evidence to a committee, we get a lot of Senate and Congress subcommittees, or like UK Parliament select committees, they're called here, and that kind of thing. You could be just acknowledged by name. Sometimes it's not your work that's being cited, it's just someone saying, like, we would like to acknowledge Professor Alice Smith, at Boston for her help with this manuscript, or help with this project, or whatever. And so we need to be capturing that too. And again, I'll show an example of this in a minute, but what we're looking for is the person's name, and in an academic context, so their name and an academic institution kind of close to each other. That's what the system's looking for. And then we do some checks around, is this really them, or is it, a different Alice Smith? Someone just with the same name as in university. So I'll go back over that, with the real example in a minute, because Joan Rawls has all three of those. But in brief, what the app is trying to do is, first of all, present the data in a few different ways. So right now I'm looking at policy citation. So where has my work appeared in policy? I could turn it around a little bit and say, show me all my research, show those 66 articles, do an article by article basis, like which ones have citations, which ones don't. There's a little bit about where does the data come from, and this kind of thing as well. So I'll go back to the overview, which is, has the kind of dashboard thing too. So this is the first, in terms of showing people that I might have had some kind of policy impact. Again, these numbers aren't really comparable from one person to the other, but it is enough to just say something has happened. Like I have appeared in 49 48 different policy documents from, however many different countries this is. And I can share the map and do the export of the underlying data for that, this kind of thing. And then, oh, yeah, sorry, I should have from this share profile. So I mentioned you need a login to use the app, by which I mean you need to log in to track your own papers. But if you want to share your profile, you can just turn that on and copy the link, and you can send that to anyone. They don't need to log in to view it. That'll just kind of work straight off the bat. Or I could email it to somebody, or just copy the link. So a key kind of concept we wanted to keep throughout the app is auditability. So any numbers or any dots on the map here, we want to show you what the underlying data is so you can kind of inspect it for yourself. And that's again because of that whole impact is subjective thing. Like it depends, for some people being mentioned by a defense think tank is actually the impact they want. For other people, it's something completely different. So for John Rawls, I can look at all of the different policy citations on the dashboard. I'm just going to see the most recent ones. But here, what it's saying is this paper by John Rawls from 1991 is cited in this this policy document, this beliefs, needs, and participations. Here in another one, the idea of overlapping consensus in this policy document. And I can click through to any of these. These are all open. So this is something from the German Institute of Development and Sustainability. There's no kind of paywalled content in here. Everything is, you can click on it and read the document for yourself. And we try and point you towards exactly where you have been cited. So in this case, we're saying John Rawls's paper was cited on page 10. And if I click on that, it'll take me straight to the page of the policy document so I can see for myself, which I haven't actually tested before doing this demo, but oh yeah, there we go. So that's good. I could go horribly wrong, but it is there. Yeah. I mentioned the intermediary thing being a big deal. So this is an example of this one here actually. So this document, I've forgotten where it was now, is in the German Institute of Development and Sustainability. And you might think, well, that doesn't really mean anything to me from a policy impact perspective. If I was a German academic, it might mean a lot, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything to John Rawls. But we're also tracking how many times that document has then been picked up elsewhere in policy. So you've got this multi-hop thing. So John Rawls has been cited in that German development think tank, but then that German development think tank's policy brief that cites John Rawls has in turn been picked up by looks like another German think tank and the Center for Strategic and International Studies. So we should find a we should look for another government example of that in the middle, but the concept is the same. So we're looking for where it could be a hop away from the kind of impact you want, and that is really common. Let me just quickly see if there's another one down here in the full list. Yeah, here we go. So here, his paper, Social Unity in Primary Goods, has been cited by something from the EU, this 2021 Pension Adequacy Report. And then that Pension Adequacy Report has gone on to be cited in 36 other policy documents. So he's been cited once, but then it expands out, including, the European Parliament, OECD, lots of European things. Let's see some more. European Central Bank. Yeah, you get the idea. Council of the European Union. So I mentioned the quantitative thing before, and this is why it needs to be quantitative, because depending on what John Rawls cares about, some of these will be more interesting than others. It's really difficult to say, you have a policy impact score of, 7.2 or whatever, because of different people have different ideas of what they care about or what's important. I'm just going to quickly show two things actually. One is you can share your profile and the pictures there, and then the other thing you can do is download the data, either as CSV or PowerPoint. So PowerPoint was always really popular in testing, surprisingly popular, I think. And it just gives you quite a visual way of showing where have you been cited in it. When you download it, it shows you like the thumbnail of the policy document, and it tells you like it's on page 157 and all this kind of thing. I won't actually download it, but that's what that button is. And then I mentioned that third type of engagement that we track, so the name mentions. And that looks a bit like this. So this is, instead of John Rawls's papers being cited, John Rawls, his name has been picked up. And we do this in the main Overton, in the Overton app as well, but we do it slightly differently because in the main Overton app, you tend to be looking at a list of 100 people at once or a whole university at a time. And therefore, there's not really any scope for kind of manual curation. You can't say to somebody, okay, you can't say to an administrator at University of Michigan, are we missing any articles? Or like, check that all these articles are correct, because, there's too many. But if you're dealing with one person, they can. They're both incentivized to go through it and make sure that we're capturing the data and to remove any false positives. So what that means in practice is in Overton, we end up being more precise, but over a smaller set. Whereas in the Profiles app, we're able, because we're working with the researcher themselves, to give them more data, where some of it is, can you check this for us? So it's a bit more work for them, but it picks up a wider variety of different name mentions. So, I mean, we do basic text as well, that not to imply that what appears in here is wrong. It's more that we're prepared to take the risk that it's wrong and then give you a flag to say, wait, don't include this in my report. By kind of reporting an issue. Sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit. By reporting an issue with it. But if you scroll through, you can get an idea of what it looks like. So in this case, he's kind of his name is being acknowledged rather than he's on a committee or he's being thanked or anything specifically. The way we do the matching is we're looking for a combination of name and academic institution. So it's not enough for the document just to say Alice Smith. It needs to say Alice Smith at Imperial College or Alice Smith at Harvard or or wherever they might be. We're specifically looking for their names in an academic researcher context. Okay, metrics. Is there anything else I should cover? Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it for the demo. The other part is obviously it's integrated with social science space. So we try to make another difference be that policy profiles is very much, about showing the researcher what's available for them and helping them use it. Then also trying to give it a bit more context. So if you go through the app, for example, and you don't have any policy mentions or policy citations, which will be the case for quite a lot of people, we try and say like why. You get a message that appears that says like why is this, and gives you some background. Like as a general rule of thumb, only 5% of published research makes into policy at all. So it's not unusual if you're an early career researcher, especially you've got like 3 or 4 papers that just nothing would be happening yet. It takes, it can take up to 5 years for things to be cited in policy. And so to try and like help people understand the context of the numbers they're seeing as well, especially if they've not got any or they've got a low number. And with the social science space, we can link it out to content and about, how do I improve it? So what are the next steps? You know, people always want to know after they see the data, once you can measure it, like what levers do I pull to get more of it? So that's the content side of it, outside the app, but in the more general S3.